Now we have seen some very basic structures in the story of the Matrix. When you build a structure of a movie, a story, a narrative, in short, any narrative, you need to build it on some foundations, otherwise the system you build will collapse. Or rather, it won't even have a chance to collapse because it wasn't built in the first place. When we look at the basic structure of the story told in the Matrix, we should not lose sight of this important pillar of the established structure. What is it? Machines and the energy sources they need. Why is this so important? Because it is one of the key points of the story told in the series. First of all, I should point out that even though the Matrix trilogy, especially the story told in the first movie of the series, is meticulously crafted, these texts cannot be divinely perfect, and logical errors are inevitable wherever there is a human factor. But as I told you before, constantly looking for logical errors in movies and chasing after them will not do you much good. On the contrary, you will undermine your own enjoyment of what you are watching. But some people are very obsessive about such things, and such logic errors drive them crazy. If there are parts of the script that don't follow common sense or logic, this significantly reduces the value of the production in the eyes of the viewer. For example, there's the famous logic error in the Lord of the Rings series. Why didn't they take the ring with the eagles? This type of question can be derived for almost any movie. If we subject cinematic works to the merciless criticism of pure reason and logic, then no production can escape such logical errors and our language. For this reason, sometimes the logical errors in movies are deliberately placed there, sometimes they are really an overlooked mistake, and sometimes we attribute a different meaning to them. But is there a logic error in the case of machines and energy sources, or is it more complicated? Let's look for answers to these questions together. Let me first explain why this subject of machines and energy sources is so important in the series. In the scenes where the Matrix is first explained, Morpheus shows Neo the world at the end of the 21st century on a retro television screen. After telling him that this world he knew was part of a brain interactive simulation, he showed him the real world, the world of machines. Here, Morpheus says to Neo,
"Welcome to the desert of the real."
Referring to Jean Baudrillard, who created the theory of simulation and has produced some very striking thoughts and writings on it. In this scene, Morpheus tells us that they have limited knowledge of the past. But one thing they remember for sure is that in the early 21st century, humanity succeeded in giving life to artificial intelligence. Morpheus describes this AI as a single consciousness that created a race of machines. He then says, "We don't know who attacked first. Maybe us, maybe them, but we know it was us who darkened the sky." According to Morpheus, at that time the machines were dependent on sunlight. Humanity believed that they could destroy the machines by blocking the sun's rays from reaching the Earth, but this was not the case. The human body generates more bioelectricity and 25,000 BTUs of body heat. When this energy was combined with a form of fusion, the machines found a way to survive without solar energy. So they created human farms, an infinite loop mechanism where humans are produced in artificial wombs, and the dead humans are liquefied to feed the living. Yes, this is how Morpheus conveys the world of machines and what he knows about the plantations to Neo, and therefore to us, the audience. But let's remember what Morpheus said before he started his words. Our knowledge is limited, so neither Morpheus nor anyone else in Zion knows more about the machines. But do we? If we were at this stage, if we, like Neo, only knew as much as Morpheus told us, we wouldn't know much more about the machines, but we know much more now. And how? Thanks to Animatrix. Actually, not only that, just like reverse engineering. When we return to the story with more information after examining the Animatrix and artificial intelligence structures, we may realize that the story Morpheus tells is incomplete and erroneous. It would be very difficult to know this while watching the series. Moreover, it may have been changed or transformed in this direction as an alternative. But since that's what we're going to explore in this video, we need to use all the data we have and revisit the relationship between machines and energy sources. First of all, Animatrix is not necessarily a story that has a direct correlation with the story that Matrix tells in the trilogy. But even though the episodes were created by different directors, the directors of the original series are also at the helm. So we can look at Animatrix as the instruction manual for the Matrix. What Animatrix does is actually called killing the frog. This is a phrase we can use for this kind of situation. If you cut the frog and look inside, you learn more about the frog, but you kill the frog. So what I mean is, thanks to Animatrix, we learned a lot about the Matrix, but we killed the main story of the Matrix in a way. Because what is attractive in movies like The Matrix is the question marks that remain in the head. Explaining them gives us pleasure, but the more something is explained, the more ordinary it becomes. But still, because of our curiosity for the unknown, this situation does not bother us, and we want to know more. Now let's go back to the story told by Morpheus. Here we see a much more detailed and expanded version of the events Morpheus tells in the second Renaissance episode of the Animatrix. In the second Renaissance, we see the inner side and details of the events that Morpheus tells in a very limited way. We see that the machines which are shown to us as absolute enemies in the series may actually have a share of righteousness. A robot with the number B166ER, a domestic servant, defies her master, and the rebellion she starts snowballs and starts a chain of events that will bring machines and humans to the brink of a great war. Here you might say, well, the machines were the first to attack. If that servant robot hadn't attacked and killed its master, maybe such a war would never have happened. If we look at it superficially, yes, that's true, but when we look at what drove that robot to attack its master, we can see that things are actually not like that. Remember what Morpheus said about the first AI they revived: a single consciousness creating a race of machines. So first of all, we have to understand that we're not dealing with different AIs or robots. They are all governed by a single consciousness that is collectively interconnected. So the sum total of all the machines is one consciousness, their thought system, their brain. So this decision to rebel against its master cannot be attributed to a single robot. It has to be characterized as a collective decision of the machines. That's why humanity destroys a large part of the robots after this event, and drives the rest to a desolate and barren part of the world. But there is a big mistake that humans made here. They didn't eliminate all the machines when they had the opportunity, because the machines were extremely unprepared and defenseless in the face of a sudden attack and genocide. But when the humans exiled what was left of the machines, they built a city for themselves from scratch. In this city, which they named 01, they achieved extraordinary technology and power, and that was the end of the human race. First economically and then militarily, they devastated the human race. Now I'm not going to get into ethical debates here. After all, as a human being, I have to side with the human species and support the decision of the United Nations to wage war against the machines. After all, the B1 killing its owner was naturally seen as an unacceptable act and rightly perceived by people as a harbinger of an event that posed a serious threat to humanity. After all, a robot must obey its master no matter what. But in order to make a proper analysis, we need to consider the events within the nature of the story itself. The story gives us some details that reflect the rightness of the machines. For example, humans treat these sentient robots in an extremely evil and slavish manner. So what? They are robots, they are slaves in a way, right? Yes, actually they are, but the point of this story is how selfish and self-centered human beings are. Because people have gotten to such a state, as we saw in the second Renaissance, that they have given up everything for the sake of their own comfort. They became so lazy and so spoiled because the heavy workloads and the service sector were completely outsourced to machines, that as a result of this, they made this critical life. They designed machines as an intelligence that they could improve themselves, so that they would be better at what they do, and we would never need them. Without any restrictions or precautions. If you create such a consciousness and give it a will, you will suffer the consequences. This phenomenon, which we see in many science fiction works, that artificial intelligence has consciousness and will at the same time, quickly leads humanity to dystopia. This is the inevitable end because human beings by nature cannot live under the domination of a machine of their own making because of their pride and arrogance. This contradicts the impulse of artificial intelligence, which has become a superior species, to hold power and rule, and we will be driven towards a great destruction. In many science fiction movies this structure is set up and in the end humanity somehow manages to stop or destroy this power. But what I love about The Matrix is that it shows that the machines win in this story. Even after the Second Renaissance War, and even in the last part of the Matrix trilogy when Neo makes peace with the machines won. Since the day the machines came to the United Nations for the second time and started the Matrix program, where they had previously come for peace and were expelled, Humanity has always been on the losing side, and this has not changed throughout the story. Now Morpheus tells us that we darkened the sun to destroy the machines, and the machines started to use our bodies instead of solar energy. Later, when Neo meets the architect at the entrance of the source, this issue comes up again, and the following important dialogue takes place between Neo and the architect. When the architect says that they are going to destroy the entire human race, Neo says, "You can't allow that. You need people to live." Well, what can he say? He knows that much. And the architect says in response,
"There are levels of survival we are prepared to accept."
Now how can we know if the architect is telling the truth here? Couldn't he be bluffing? Couldn't he be using such a method to manipulate the elected? Well, no. The architect is telling the exact truth here. When we watch the movie carefully, we see that the character of the architect, who is tried to be shown to us as unreliable, tells Neo nothing but the truth at this point. The architect is actually the spokesperson of the machines, so even though the person talking to Neo here is a program, the upper mind is the consciousness that humanity managed to give life to years ago, and that consciousness knows human very well. Because after the Second Renaissance, machines had the opportunity to do research on humans for a very long time. As a manifestation of this, the architect says to Neo here, in reference to his constant denial of what he has been told, the most obvious human reaction is to deny the truth. This is indeed the case, because at the point where the story brings us, we as the audience do not accept what the architect is telling us. This is because of the perfect structure that has been deliberately set up. This structure includes the architect's particularly dull and emotionless expression, his use of patronizing rhetoric, and the dramatic structure set up by targeting the chosen, the Neo, and therefore the side that represents humanity, that is us, and forcing us to choose between the death of the Trinity and the fate of humanity. This dramatic structure, which is built with great skill and which is called the moment of crisis according to the hero's journey formula, leads us, the viewers, to think that the architect is lying. So what does the architect mean here? Let's go back to what he said. There are levels of survival we are prepared to accept. Levels of survival that we are willing or ready to accept. He uses the word levels, that is, forms of life, stages of life. What does the architect actually mean here? So we don't have to exist only in machine form. Therefore, the architect is actually telling Neo here that the fields are not there for our energy needs, but to keep you under control. Neo realizes these facts after a long conversation with the architect. Because when Neo returns to Morpheus after meeting with the architect, the following conversation takes place between them.
If we don't do something in 24 hours, Zion will be destroyed.
How do you know that?
I was told it would happen.
By whom?
It doesn't matter. I believed him.
Then he tells Morpheus that the prophecy is a lie, and he says, "I know this is hard to hear, but I swear it's true." Obviously here Neo realizes that what the architect says is true and hides from the others that he met with the architect, that he learned this information from the architect. Now let me explain step by step why it is a deception, a lie, why machines need humans for energy. Now for this we need to go back to the beginning of the story, back to the Second Renaissance, where it all started. Now when humans exiled the machines came to Mesopotamia, which is called the cradle of civilization. This is not a randomly chosen region. There are beautiful details behind the machines building their nations here. This region is what the Arabs call Al-Hilal al-Khasib, which means the Fertile Crescent. It's a crescent-shaped region in the Middle East, including modern-day Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, northern Kuwait, southeastern Turkey, and the western part of the country. Known in English as the Fertile Crescent, it is one of the first areas where settled farming emerged, as humans began the process of clearing and modifying natural vegetation to grow newly domesticated plants as crops. This resulted in the development of early human civilizations, such as Sumer in Mesopotamia. Do you understand why the machines built their nations here and raised their children here, and why, after imprisoning people here, they called the area where they were imprisoned the fields and called the people the harvest or the seed? Here the machines were already growing and developing at an incredible speed even before they won the war. Everything will become clearer when we put the events and situations in historical order. The machines are building 01 in the late 21st century. When the machines started the Matrix program, they simulated the year 1999, the peak of humanity. The people in Zion think they are in 2199. Remember what Morpheus said to Neo in the first movie in this scene. You think it's 1999, but it's almost 2199. We can't say the exact year because we don't know it either. Morpheus doesn't know, but according to the information we got from the Zion archives, the war starts in 2139 and ends in about 2699. In other words, after the first wars between machines and humans, 200 years have passed according to Morpheus's calculation, and 540 years according to our calculation. Even if we calculate this period from the minimum, think about the level of machines in 200 years. Because even with a small community, they had built the machine city in a short time, and managed to create a better intelligence than themselves. Now add to that the research and studies they did for many years on millions of people they captured after winning the war. Now if we say to such an army of machines that they need energy from the bodies of humans to live, we would be ridiculous. For example, remember what humanity was doing after the war started in the Second Renaissance? They put the Dark Storm Effect project into effect and darkened the sun. Why didn't the Dark Storm Effect project work back then, when there were no fields, and the only source of energy for machines was supposedly solar energy? Yes, the machines suffered from this, of course, but it wasn't enough to destroy them, because in a world without the sun, it was the machines, not humans, who were able to adapt to the nuclear winter atmosphere. The simple protein-based bodies of humans were seen as a tool, not an essential energy source for the machines. They didn't destroy them because they didn't want to destroy them, not for energy. Even though the machines had reached a superior technology and power than humans, they still saw them as their gods. They were trying to understand them, to analyze them. They were especially trying to understand abstract concepts such as love in humans. They could only achieve this through Neo in the 6th Matrix cycle. That's why they chose to keep them under control instead of destroying them. Because giving more say on the planet to a species that destroyed even their own sun to win the war would be harmful for their own security. The Matrix is a dystopian story. There is no happy ending. Therefore, the misconception that machines need humans for energy is a very clever and successful structure that is consciously woven into the story. Neo realized this structure before he died. Before he sacrificed himself for humanity, he realized that the machines would always be the controlling force, that the Chosen would never change anything. But actually it did. When the machines absorbed Neo's body, they analyzed the concept of love and sacrifice a little bit more. Because they ultimately wanted to be like their gods, to be human. I close the video with this quote from the Zion archive editor after humanity's Dark Storm Effect project.
May there be mercy on man and machine for their sins.